Here we go. Hello and welcome to Perspective Shift with me, your host, Colby Martin. I think I'm going to rename this show, by the way, at some point. Perspective Shift is a great name for my newsletter that gets sent out, by the way, every Wednesday. You should sign up. The link will be on screen here in a minute. But I think I'm going to eventually change the name of my Wednesday show. So if you have any suggestions of what I should call this Wednesday afternoon live show, I'm open to it. Today, we are going to continue talking about this book that I put into the world a year ago, The Shift, Surviving and Thriving After Moving from Conservative to Progressive Christianity. And I just want you to notice how on brand the color scheme is. I mean, even my surfboard that I don't ever use is with the brand of The Shift, and that lamp. I don't know. I just feel like if you're going to do something, make your whole, if you're going to write a book, make your whole life in that template. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about how last week I invited you to share with me and with all of us what's been the hardest part of your faith shift. And it turns out, as you can see on the screen there, loneliness, beliefs, and relationships all made their way to the top. Also coming up on today's show, which is why probably many of you are here, my good buddy Brandan J. Robertson. And if you don't know what J stands for, can you just put some guesses in the comment section? Because I'm curious, what do you think J stands for? Brandan J. Robertson is going to join me here live. Guys, this is our first guest on Perspective Shift. That's exciting. I don't know. I really think it's going to be fun talking to Brandan about faith shift. So that is what's going on. Welcome to Perspective Shift. Tentatively retitled later. We've already got an early guess here. Logan guesses that it stands for James. Brandan James Robertson. It's a possibility. James is a good name, right, James? Lean hard. So here, if you've never joined me before for Perspective Shift, you're like, what is this? Who is this guy? My name is Colby Martin. And down on the bottom, you can see it ticking there, scrolling along, colbymartin.substack.com. I write a weekly newsletter that I call Perspective Shift, and it gets sent out every Wednesday morning. And I tend to write about the overlap of like the Venn diagram of religion and spirituality and psychology. Those are three of my favorite interests. And so I write about those things. And up until last week, I had been writing about the authority of the Bible, which has been a ton of fun. And I got about 9 parts into that series. And then I took a quick pause because last week was the 1-year anniversary of the aforementioned release of my book, second book, The Shift. And, you know, when it came out last year, it was right at the height, the then height. We've since surpassed it. But at that point, it was like the height of the pandemic in America. It was like, oh, this is something I think everybody now needs to pay attention to. And people were really panicking, freaking out for really good reasons. And as a result, a book like this, which is like a survival guide for becoming a progressive Christian, just wasn't really high on people's radar. They wanted to know how to grow potatoes in their backyard. They wanted to know how to filter water so they could survive a potential apocalypse. So, you know, my book just, the launch was dwarfed by more pressing concerns and again, I totally get it. But it's a book that I'm super proud of and think offers a ton of, I almost said the word help. I guess help is one way to phrase it. Although it feels a little bold of me to be like, I can help you. I don't know if I can. But what I can do is I can try to normalize your experience. So when you've either left conservative Christianity or maybe been kicked out of it, shown the door, what I've noticed over the last decade is that many of us who've had this experience have, we kind of go through the same sorts of things. We're all unique, and we all have these shared ways that this journey lands with us. And so I thought, what if there was like a little bit of a survival guide, a little bit of a manual, like, hey, when this obstacle comes along, and it will, if it hasn't already, it very likely will. When it comes along, here's what helped me, and here's what might help you. So that's what we're taking the next few weeks here at Perspective Shift to to talk about. Last week, I told you a bit of the story of the launch of this, and I invited you to share with me what has been the hardest part of your faith shift. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the scene where I put my little computer up here, and this has today's article that went out in today's newsletter. And what I did is I tried to compile a little bit some of the most common answers to my question of what was the hardest part of your faith shift. And so I'm going to read through this pretty quickly. Usually what we do here is I'll read through an article, I'll pause periodically, I'll engage with you, see your comments and your questions, which, by the way, hi, Krista Davis. So glad you're here with us this afternoon. Hi, Odette, coming in from Puerto Rico. So glad you're here. And Phil has a guess on what the J in Brandan J. Robertson means. Jandon. So Phil's current guess is Brandan Jandon Robertson. I really hope you're right, Phil. I really hope that Brandon's parents years ago were like, it would be fun. Brandan Jandon. Anyway, so what was I saying? Oh yeah, normally I read through this and pause and interact with you and respond to questions. Feel free to still do that. I just might go a little quicker today so that we can get to Brandan Jandon here in hopefully about 15, 20 minutes. Okay? Does that sound good, everyone? Go ahead and just nod and I'll feel your affirmation in about 15 seconds when the delay finally reaches you. All right. So here is this week's Perspective Shift article. It is about your responses to the hardest parts of a faith shift. Okay, here we go. So last week, I told you about how I was going to spend some time relaunching the shift. And one of the ways that I want to do that, one of the ways I want to sort of celebrate and relaunch the shift is to engage with you, readers and followers and viewers, about your shifting experience. And I posed the question to you last week, what has been the hardest part of your shift? And I gotta say, y'all showed up in some beautiful and vulnerable ways. It really was moving to get all your responses. Thank you for sharing them with me. Thank you for trusting me with those parts of your stories. Thank you for letting me into that part of your world. It really is an honor. And as I read through your responses on the Substack page, because people can leave comments there, and some of you chose to email me directly to keep them a little more confidential, and then there was many that responded on the posts over on the Grams. I noticed in the responses, I noticed three big themes show up. Loneliness. What's the hardest part? Loneliness. What's the hardest part? Beliefs, something having to do with beliefs, and then relationships. And so that is what I wanted to reflect on today and just reflect back to you a little bit of what your responses to my question was. Loneliness. Justin Mezzatine is coming in hot from DC. Hello, Justin. Did you know that our guest today is also coming in hot from DC? That's exciting. Mandy, it's been a minute. It's good to see you. So glad you're here. I'm so sorry that it's been a tough day. Is wine okay right now? Mandy says. Mandy, yes. I don't know maybe if you are living in Hawaii and it's like 11 in the morning, even still, no judgment, but yes, please, by all the means, partake and enjoy. Okay, so the first common theme that showed up in your responses was loneliness. Many of you named the pain of no longer being connected to community after you shifted. Here's a quote from John. The fundamentalist church that I left, it was my social and my spiritual home. And for many of us, like John, our church family was our family for all intents and purposes. They were the people that we ate with, the people that we celebrated holidays with. They were the people we shared birthday parties with. They were there when our kids were born, and we were there when their kids got married. Super Bowls, quinceañeras, potlucks, house moving day, all of those things happened in the context of our church community. But then your beliefs began to shift, and you no longer fit or could no longer in good conscience stay in your church community, and so you left. But then, loneliness. Sure, we might have tried to hold on to some of the relationships, and some of you know what this is like, but those get-togethers were just awkward. Did you ever try that? Like after you left a church community, you're like, yeah, but let's still stay friends. Let's still stay connected. And then you get that first kind of like social hangout together and everyone's just kind of dancing around the obvious elephant in the room. Like, yeah, I don't really go to that church anymore because the pastor, remember, thinks that my kid is going to go to hell because they're gay. But yeah, cool that you're still going there. Want another hot dog? Yeah, those were awkward. Tiffany says this: the hardest part is the loneliness, which for me is two parts. Being alone with my newfound progressive Christian faith, and the loneliness of no longer having a family, either church family or actual family. Sorry, Tiffany. I totally resonate with what Tiffany's saying here. When you shift away from conservative Christianity, it seems, this has been sort of my unofficial data here, it seems like 9 times out of 10, there is not a new progressive Christian community ready and waiting to welcome you with open arms. Well, to be clear, there might be those communities, and they're almost always the kind that are welcome with opening arms. It's just that they're not easy to find. Not easy to find. Like when it comes to conservative or evangelical churches, most of us, especially here in America, I don't know what it's like for you in Germany, Olaf, but here in America, we have so many options, it's ridiculous. But if you move away from that world and you try to find a church with more liberal or progressive theology, suddenly the pickings get a whole lot slimmer. And then, especially for those of us like myself who might be post-evangelical, the options get even bleaker when we try to look for a church that's still kind of, sort of like the ones you came from, that you were used to, with youth groups for your kids and a modern style of music and that sort of casual, chill vibe. Yeah, churches like that, even harder to find. Even harder to find. Here's how one reader put it: the hardest part of faith shifting has been finding community. She said, I miss home groups. I miss the worship style that I used to know and love and was familiar with. I miss God in that corporate sense. I miss the mystical component of my non-denominational charismatic past. How many of you can relate to Maggie? Maybe you shifted away from your previous church and you looked for something more progressive, more open, more inclusive, more liberal. And maybe you tried an Episcopal church or a United Church of Christ or Lutheran, a more liberal branch. And for many, was a wonderful, needed, good shift. For others, it was hard because it's like, yeah, love the theology and the people seem great, but I really miss those parts of church that I don't want to lose. I just don't want the crappy theology and the ridiculous power structures. And anyway, so not only is it hard to lose the community that we used to have, but then it's equally hard to try and find something new to replace it. So I think Hanu summed it up really well. The loneliness is the worst. Loneliness is the worst. Oh my gosh, Mandy, you just finished Love Makes Room. Oh, the new book from Stacy Frennis that you bought because of. Oh, that's super fun. I'm so delighted by that. If you're just joining us or have joined us in the last few minutes, hi, welcome to Perspective Shift. I'm your host, Colby, and I'm reading through this morning's article as I reflect on your answers to my question of what's been the hardest part of your faith shift. And it's all within the context of sort of relaunching my book, The Shift, Surviving and Thriving After Moving from Conservative to Progressive Christianity. And in just a few moments, we're going to be joined by a friend of mine, Brandan J. Maybe it's James, maybe it's Jandon, as was one viewer predicted earlier. Brandan J. Robertson is going to join us to talk about his experience with shifting of faith. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But now let's continue on with today's article. Beliefs was the number 2 most common response. Just behind loneliness, in the category of things most often said when I asked people what was the hardest part, are challenges associated with beliefs. Beliefs. I like how Hanu put it again. By the way, Hanu, your comment last week was golden. Thank you for sharing. I mean, I'm sorry for all the pain, obviously. And also, thank you for courageously sharing it with us. This is part of what I love so much about this community that we're building here together. Hanu wrote this, talking about his faith shift. The simplistic clarity of everything is gone. Yeah. The simplistic clarity is gone. Like, do you feel that, or did you feel, or do you know what Hanu's talking about? I mean, even though most of us, and again, I won't presume this is true for all of us, but most of us who've shifted are now like, oh, good gravy. How could I have believed those things for so long? And at the same time, there's a little bit of like, but also it kind of made sense. There was some clarity there, or at least what I thought was clarity. Not as in, like the universe created in 7 literal days makes sense. Like that, not that sort of making sense, because those sorts of things are often what we had to move away from and reject and be like, ultimately, no, that doesn't make sense. Obviously, we challenge those sorts of beliefs because they didn't make sense. But I mean in the way that something can just sort of make sense simply by virtue of there existing a larger system in which all of the parts fit relatively nicely. And conservative evangelical Christianity has done a masterful job of creating this tight-fitting puzzle where most of the pieces, like, they have a decently reasonable sounding place within the larger system. Like, there's a structure to their systematic theology. There's a purpose to each of the beliefs. There are answers to every question. There was this certainty, that seductive, intoxicating drug that many of us miss so dearly. So yeah, Hanu, I'm with you. There was a simplicity and a clarity that I said goodbye to and left behind when I left my conservative Christian roots. And I'll say this. Some of you might have seen the video or at least heard that it was happening, is that I did a YouTube conversation with Sean McDowell a couple weeks ago, and Sean McDowell is the son of Josh McDowell, the famed author of Evidence That Demands a Verdict, one of my favorite books when I was in high school and college. And, Sean's point, or his goal in the video, is to try to find clarity with me as a progressive Christian. And I told him before the interview started, I'm like, just so you know, I'm not going to be able to give you what you're looking for. Because the idea of clarity made so much sense in sort of my evangelical world, and it just makes a whole lot less sense. And it's not because things are less rational or reasonable. It's just this idea, this sort of almost like this mythological idea of something being so clear and obvious. It's just not necessarily something I think is all that accurate or indicative of the world that we live in. So anyway, as I often stumble around trying to articulate responses to questions and try to put language to some of what I think and believe now, it can at times just feel a bit clunky. And when I compare that to my evangelical days where I could just rattle off the Bible verses and talk about the systematic theology and the way that justification and sanctification are different manifestations of salvation, like all that is just so clear and simple. And kind of miss that. Okay. Brandan is giving us a sneak peek on what the J stands for. I guess it's Jehoshaphat. So sorry, Phil. I guess it's not Jandon. It's not Brandan Jandon Robertson. It's Brandan Jehoshaphat Robertson. That's exciting. That's the most biblical name I've ever heard in my entire life. Okay, let's move on then. Also challenging as it relates to beliefs when we have a faith shift, is trying to liberate ourselves from oppressive, toxic theology of our conservative background. Or as Jules put it, the hardest part was to get to a place of acceptance about my own feelings toward the LGBTQ community and overcoming my own internalized homo/transphobia. Yeah. And Jules is not alone in this. Countless people I've talked with who have shifted are still trying to sort through the baggage of old ideas that are lodged inside our brains, or more precisely, that are stuck inside our body. Our brains might have moved on, right? We might have like a new idea about a thing, but our body retains religious ideas like a sponge. I've heard so many variations of something like this. Yeah. I know, I get it. God doesn't condemn me because I'm gay. I totally believe that. So how come I still end up feeling queasy inside whenever I hold my partner's hand? Some variation of that. Or maybe we've rightly concluded that there's not an eternal hell of fire awaiting the damned in the afterlife. Like we've left behind this absurd notion that there is eternal conscious torment for those who don't have the correct belief about who God is and who they are and who Jesus is. And yet we might still wake up in the middle of the night terrified that we're going to end up there. We're going to end up in the hell that we don't believe because we've walked away from the Lord. All right. And so we have this weird tension between our minds have moved on, but our body still sort of retains and holds on to these old beliefs. And then there's what this reader shared. Alex wrote, I thought that when you can no longer sign your name to the list of things to believe as a Christian because the Bible says so, then you can't be an authentic believer. Like Alex reflected on, I just assume I can't call myself a Christian anymore because I can no longer check all the boxes that my church told me I had to believe in order to be a Christian. And I'm wondering if you can relate to this. Relate to the feeling that you don't get to be a Christian. Like, you don't get to be a Christian anymore. Or you don't get to call yourself one anymore because you no longer believe the things your previous church told you to believe. And I just wonder if for you, because it was for me, this messy, clunky, frustrating experience, to long to be who you are and yet constantly be at war in your own mind against these old messages. So not only has loneliness been one of the most common things that people have shared has been the hardest part, but just all the different engaging with beliefs, trying to shed the old beliefs, trying to really embody the new beliefs, losing a sense of everything sort of made sense back then. And now, I don't know, I'm feeling sort of untethered. All right. And then finally, thirdly, relationships. The third most common refrain as it relates to the hardest parts of faith shifting has to do with relationships. The friends we lose, the family that shuts us out, the loved ones who don't freaking leave us alone and continue to hurl their phony, I'm concerned for you. To put it succinctly, the hardest part, as Chad said, is relationship shrapnel. Ugh. Relationship shrapnel. Just typing that out yesterday just made me like, yeah, relationship shrapnel. Like mentioned a minute ago, so many people experience their church as their family. So then to lose both your religious community and your family, all why? Because you changed your mind about some ideas? It's brutal. It's brutal. When parents reflect on what the hardest part of their shift has been, they often talk about how hard it can be with their kids. Deneen says, the hardest part is feeling spiritually homeless. Angst, like real angst over how it would impact my children. And then Garrett said, the hardest part has been a profound uprootedness and a sense that my daughters have been disinherited of their religious and faith heritage. Yes, it is true, on one hand, that many parents are relieved that their kids no longer have to sit through Sunday school lessons that fill their mind with horrible and harmful ideas about God. True. And also, at the same time, it's really freaking hard taking our kids away from all that. And many of us don't know what, if any, to fill those gaps with. And I did a quick plug here for my friend Cindy Wong Brandt and her book, Parenting Forward. That's a great place to start if you're raising children and you're trying to do it in a non-fundamentalist way. Anyway, that link is on the article that you can get to with the URL on screen. Relationships. Like now in my life, I have incredible friends. Like to the point where I'm not sure I've ever had friends in my life until now. Ones that are closer and dearer to me than ever before. But that's only because I'm a solid decade on the other side of my shift. When I think about the first few years after my faith shift, it was just, again, so lonely, so sad to feel like the black sheep in my own family and my friend group. I remember this hard pendulum swing from being like the golden boy of my college alma mater to suddenly like Colby Martin. Never heard of him. Like suddenly my college alma mater is like Peter at the fire on the night that Jesus was arrested. Oh, never heard of the guy. Nope, don't know him. Yeah, relationship shrapnel. It freaking hurts, man. It freaking hurts. So I'll close just by saying that when I wrote this book, The Shift, I was trying to envision it as a sort of survival guide for becoming a progressive Christian. In other words, I reflected not just on my own journey, but on the many, like the journeys that were shared today and shared with me last week, who've experienced this phenomenon, and I tried to think, what are some of the biggest obstacles that we all seem to face? And so I broke the shift up into 3 parts. The first part is about re-understanding the idea of faith, detaching it from just the sense that faith is just a list of things that we believe and that what we believe is the most important thing to God. The second part of the book is 4 chapters looking at some of the biggest obstacles related to beliefs. Specifically, what do we do when our ideas of God no longer make sense? Or what do we do about Jesus? What the heck is the Bible anymore? And church, that chapter is titled I Can't Stand the Church. Do you know one in my city I could try? Like we just have this love-hate, push-pull relationship with church. And then the book ends with several chapters trying to help people navigate things like, what do you do when your friends and your family are no longer supporting you in your faith journey? Like, what do you do with that? Or what do you do when you've experienced some shifting of your faith, but you notice inside there's this internal resistance, this internal struggle? The chapter is called Waging the War Within. When your old self comes online, like, no, we fought really hard to get here. Thank you very much. And I just want to go and shift and change everything that you believe and think. I don't think so. You rubbed my lamp. You brought me here. Now sit down. You're getting your 3 wishes. So anyway, that's what the bit of the shift is about. So if you think a book like that might be helpful for you, then definitely, if you're watching this now, live or later, then just, again, check out The Shift, a book that came out last year and that I'm sort of relaunching these couple weeks here. So then, that's the end of the article. So this week's question now that I posed to you. Last week you responded, what's the hardest part of your faith shift? Now this week I pose this question to you. What's been the most surprising part of your faith shift? And you can take this in any direction you want. Oh yeah, there's a graphic. What's been the most surprising about your faith shift? You can, surprising good, surprising hard, surprising, just surprising. What's something you didn't see coming when you set out on this shifting journey? And just like I said last week, you can, if you're reading this on my Substack page, you can just comment right there. If you read this in the newsletter that you got this morning, you can reply to the email and I'll see it. You can post it over on the Instagram that I'll probably drop over there later this afternoon. And I would love to hear your responses. Okay, and then here is what's happening next. My buddy Brandan Jehoshaphat is going to join us here. So, that was today's article. And again, thank you for those of you who shared and opened yourself up a bit to this response of what has been the hardest part of your shift. Hopefully, even as you saw some of the responses that I put up there, hopefully you just feel a little less alone, knowing that loneliness is one of the most common challenges. Because you're not lonely because you're doing it wrong. You're lonely because it just is hard and it's lonely. And trying to shift away from all those old beliefs and extricate them, eradicate them from our bodies takes time. It takes time. So of course you have those moments where you're like, I don't think that anymore. So why am I getting all anxious about it? Yeah, that's super normal. That takes time. My therapist calls it takes time to record new tapes to overwrite the old tapes. It takes time. And then relationships. Man, it's hard. It's hard. Relationships are hard anyway. even in ideal circumstances, adult friendships and familial relationships is just really freaking hard. So then add in this other dynamic of you might no longer believe a set of ideas that your community or your friends or family say, no, you have to believe these things. Oh man, now we're just adding layers. So I'm just saying it's not that you're doing it wrong. It's just really freaking hard. Okay. All right. So I'd love to hear your responses. You can leave them as comments here, or like I said, you can any way you want to send it to me. I'd love to know what's been the most surprising for you as you have faith shifted. Oh, Kevin Johnson. Hello, Kevin Johnson. I'm glad you're here. Kevin writes, given all the baggage that has been attached to the term Christian, it's a bit of a relief to be known as an Episcopalian. Though some use that as an insult, I'm sure they do. Yeah, that's true. I'm kind of envious that you have a whole different term to give yourself. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Oh, and then Kevin added, shifting did allow me to experience my faith as my own and not a faith of family. Yeah, I think that's a really, really important. Okay, now is the time that many of you have been waiting for. So without further ado, then as I've already done, can we welcome to the show, Brandan Johnson. That clapping is for you. Brandan, looks like you've got yourself muted, or at least my program says you've muted yourself. So if that's not true, then just log off and log back on. This is a sometimes bug that happens with this program. And so it's not you. I'll just say it's me. So Brandan's going to come right back. So psych. Do people still say psych? But yeah, I've heard that's a weird thing where like the program says the guests are muted, but they're not really muted. So we'll try it again. We'll just bring Brandan back on. And in the meantime, I hear you now. There you are.
Can you hear me? Got it?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. Oh, this is great. What's up, man?
Not much. It's so good to be here. And I gotta say, I was joking. My middle name is actually James.
It is James. Okay. All right. I had a feeling Jehoshaphat was not accurate. There was a James guess earlier, so Logan got it correct. Good job, Logan. And then James seconded James. So I don't know if that's just because he really liked his own name, and so he wanted you to have also that as well. But yes, it is Brandan. Did you see that one person said Jandon? Their guess was Jandon.
No, I didn't see that.
Brandan
Wow.
Jandon. That was their guess.
Good guess.
Well, Brandan, so you and we've known each other for, 7 years, more or less, give or take. Back when you were like
something like that.
12, 13. How old are you now? I don't know.
I'm at the ripe old age of 28 now.
Okay, yeah, no, that is. Brandan and I, a couple years ago, went to New York to take part in what was called the Millennial Leadership Project. And there was like 30 millennials that were invited to come out and kind of just do stuff. I'm not entirely sure all of what we did. But one of the running jokes was like, I just barely made the cut. Because it depends on who defines what a millennial is. And sometimes the goal is moved and I'm no longer considered. But most times when you look at what a millennial is, I was born in 82 and I think I still count. But it was nice of you all to let this old fogey join you.
You count. I mean, it's now that both of us can say we were born in the late 1900s, I think we get to claim millennial.
That's awesome. So. That's awesome. Well, Brandan, thanks for saying yes to my invite today. So I invited Brandan to hop on here and join me today for a number of reasons. One, I have a ton of respect for you and what you do and the work you do in the world. Even specifically as it relates to helping people make this shift, make this movement from a sort of conservative, fundamentalist, evangelical world to something that is not that, Yeah. And we both, you were a pastor at a church for 3 or 4 years, and a church very similar to my church as well, where a lot of the people that we welcomed through the doors were people that were looking for a landing place after making this shift. And so I know that you have a lot of experience with people who have, like we mentioned earlier in the program, experienced loneliness, challenges as it relates to beliefs, and relationship shrapnel, as Chad so I think just succinctly and perfectly put it. And so what I thought I would do then, friends who are watching this now or later, is I thought I would bring Brandan on to have him respond to these questions that I've been posing and will pose to the community here over the next couple weeks as it relates to the shifting journey of our faith. And so, if you're good with it, I'm going to throw the first question on the screen and then invite you
Let's
to
do it.
respond. All right. So, Brandon, here's my first question, and it's the one that we've all been answering today: is what for you was the hardest part of your shift? And you can give a little bit of context and background of what your shift looked like or what it was, like what you came out of.
Yeah.
So feel free to give some context to that and then tell us a bit about the hardest part of your shift.
Yeah. It's a hard question to ask because of all the things you've already said in the program today. I think I grew up in a fundamentalist Baptist world and then kind of went into mainstream evangelicalism and then had a journey through the neo-reformed Mark Driscoll world and then found myself in the Anglican world and then finally kind of came out on the other side completely dejected and cynical and wondering if there was ever a place that I could have within Christianity as at the time a on my way out of the closet gay person. And so I think if you would have asked, I would have said probably years ago that it was the relationships. It was like so many people have already attested to that when I started asking questions while I was a student at Moody Bible Institute, people that I trusted and loved and who had like poured into me for years, all of a sudden overnight said, because you're being honest, because you're being curious, because you're asking questions, we're suspicious of you. We don't think that you're, I mean, it goes even as far to say we think you're being influenced by Satan and you're willfully trying to deceive people. And when you're still in that box, that's so traumatic because I still believed all of that theology to some degree. And I mean, what a horrible thing to feel like being honest means also being demonic or satanic or whatever. And so I lost a ton of mentors, relationships, friends. I think now, in like the past couple months, actually, I've been realizing how much trauma that I have that I never realized that I had. I always kind of prided myself on telling people that, you know, I did have these very traumatic experiences, but I'm pretty good. I feel fine. I can interact with conservatives.
You're
It's
such an
easy.
Enneagram 3.
Yeah, it's so true. And COVID and then the season of transition that I'm in life has just given me an opportunity, one, to sit and reflect a little bit more. And two, there's been some interesting moments over the past few months where I've been confronted with very hateful evangelicals and realized that, man, I am still deeply wounded. And I don't want to acknowledge that because I'm a pastor. I'm a religious leader. I can't have religious wounds. What does that mean? And I'm really grateful for this season to get to work through it and be able to own that and name that. But man, it's hard and the wounds are deep and yeah, a lot of work to be done.
Thanks for sharing. I referenced earlier in the show that I did a live YouTube conversation / interview with Sean McDowell. And do you remember his dad's book, Josh McDowell, Evidence That Demands a Verdict? So
The second Bible.
that's right. So I did this live YouTube conversation with him, and you know, he invited me on just to have a conversation about some of the differences between conservative but he really just wanted to try to get some clarity around what I thought progressive Christianity was, which was a conversation for the most part that I'm pretty open to having, especially when I talk about it in terms of my layers of privilege that I possess allows me to show up in spaces like that. And it's less of an energy drain and it's less demanding and it's just safer for me, I think, in many ways to show up in those spaces. And so it's one way that I try to steward my privilege. And I've had, as I know you have as well, videos on YouTube and other platforms that have existed for a long time. And the comment sections are just full of sort of everything that you would expect comment sections to be filled with. And so I've been accustomed to that sort of language for years. This is coming to a point, by the way, to come back to your surprising about the some of the unresolved trauma, is I've been used to being called a wolf in sheep's clothing. Like, just come at me with something new. This is so boring. Heretic, false prophet, better that you've never been born, just all that stuff that I know you've gotten even worse because it comes at you as a gay man, way worse than just me as a false prophet. And I have, and I think it's legitimate. Maybe not. Maybe I'm like you and I'm convincing myself, but I think, legitimately able to read those things on YouTube and they just fly right past me. Like they don't land at all. I know they're not talking about me. It has nothing, like, just fine. People say don't read the comment section. I read it. It doesn't matter. But Brandon, here's what I noticed. When I was doing this live thing with Sean, I was watching the people that were commenting live in real time. And it turns out that there was something about it happening in real time, something about it being live that was landing in a totally different way that I wasn't aware of until as soon as the broadcast ended. Some of my friends who were watching text me and just said some really nice things and some loving things. And I just immediately started weeping. Just weep. I'm down here in my garage studio and I just started crying after my talk with Sean. And I realized how much I was holding and how much the things that people said still freaking hurt.
Mm.
It hurt.
Yeah.
Like, and I've resorted to now responding sometimes to people's comments on YouTube with just the simple comment of like, did you stop to think how this would make me feel? And just at like, that's my, like, did you think about how this would make me feel? So I apologize for talking that long when you're my guest, but
No,
it's
good.
I thank you for sharing that. And I share mine to say, yeah, I'm with you that we can feel like we're good with that. And then suddenly it hits us. We're like, oh, damn, that actually still really hurts to have people attack your integrity, challenge your sincerity, all that.
Yeah. And I think that's it exactly. It's the integrity, and it's not just an ideological disagreement, which is where it should live.
Yeah.
That space I can engage with all day long, but it's that you are fundamentally evil, bad, wicked, and it's like I just don't think there's any way psychologically around that question, especially
Yeah.
for Enneagram 3, is not like taking that personally.
Yeah. I love you, buddy.
Me too.
Yeah, Matthew, who was on that live show, watching that stream, Matthew says that comment stream was particularly bad, it seemed. He said, I've never wanted to physically fight people more than the folks in there. I'm very glad it was virtual. I'm glad too, Matthew. More glad for them because would have I would have broken my pacifism to, I don't know. Being a pacifist is hard sometimes. Okay, second question, second out of 4. What about what's been the most surprising part for you as it relates to your faith shift? And as I mentioned earlier, this could be surprising good, surprising bad. Just like, what didn't you see coming when you did this shift, or when the shift happened to you? Because I realize sometimes it's active, sometimes it's passive. Mostly, it's a combination of both. We're being pushed and pulled.
Yeah. I think on the same token, it's like two sides of the same coin. There's the pain and the hurt of being rejected, and also the playfulness and creativity that I've been able to discover with theology and with teaching the Bible and with doing all of this stuff. I'm not sure that I'm a Christian, and I still love teaching. I lead a Bible study every Thursday night. I still do these things that keep drawing me back to my tradition and to these forms that have been helpful to me at different stages in my life. And as cliche as it is for so many, I hear so many progressive Christians say this. It's like, we just can't seem to fully get away as much as I want to, as much as I want to go hang with Buddha and be cool over there. It's like, I'm still anchored in this biblical tradition. I'm still anchored to Jesus. And I've actually I've walked with people for the past 12 weeks through the book of Mark, and I'm just blown away as we're going verse by verse and like getting to really see the creativity of the author of Mark and who Jesus is and the subversive things he's doing. I mean, everything that has happened should lead me to give all this craziness up and say, Christianity, we should be done with it.
Yeah.
And instead, I keep being drawn back and inspired by it in a strange way.
I love that answer. I totally relate to being surprised at like Brokeback Mountain. I wish I knew how to quit you. Like I can't. Like I don't know. I remember when Kate and I started Sojourn, and one of my closest friends who is not in the church world anymore, he knew about my history of getting fired from 2 churches in 2 years, and he just on the phone, he's like, "You're doing what? Like, why are you going back into that? What are you doing?" Like, I don't know. I don't know why I'm going. I can't get away from it. So I love that answer. I'm surprised about um, how there's just something there. And I think you mentioned part of this, or maybe this is just what was coming up in what you were saying, is like part of this is just the water that we swim in. And we were
Yeah.
so part of it might even just be biological as much as it is cultural. Like if we were raised in some other tradition and then maybe spent some time in evangelical Christianity and then shifted out, then maybe it would be easier to leave.
Yeah.
But and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Like I don't think it's like, well, then you need to figure out how to transcend those sort of
Yeah.
attachments. Well, no, like maybe that's okay that those are our roots and that we just stay anchored in that. Maybe we stay as a reformer. Maybe we stay as just a constant thorn in people's sides with that prophetic voice of like, yeah, that's not cool. Yeah, that's not cool. Yeah, that's like, I don't
Yeah.
know what it is, man. But I'm with you. I'm also surprised at how I haven't been able to just shift away and then just move on. But
It
yeah.
would be so much easier, but yeah.
In many ways, it probably would. Um, oh, thank you, Mercy and Susan and Jay Arroyo for sharing your love around that. Okay, question number 3, Brandon. Let me get rid of that one. So, what are you most grateful for as a result of your shift?
I think it's twofold. I would say it's kind of an extension of the last question. I'd say freedom. Um, Again, I've on this side of things, I get to play, I get to create. There is
Yeah.
no fear. And so I can ask questions and teach things that, like, 3 weeks from now, I might say, that was crazy. I don't agree with that anymore. And because the congregation, when I was pastoring, I would always say, like, I'm not here to tell you the truth. I'm here to give you my perspective and cultivate a conversation. And let's disagree. If you disagree, great. And like that sort of freedom is something that I feel like I never could have dreamed of having in a more conservative
Yeah.
spiritual framework.
Yeah.
And with that has come a community of creative people that are willing to ask interesting questions and propose ridiculous, crazy things sometimes about the Bible or Jesus or whatever. And it's just, it's fun. We form deep relationships as we try to figure out life and be really honest about the things that don't make sense and the things that are really screwed up and all of that stuff. So it's the creativity and the creative community, I think,
Mm,
is what I'm most grateful for.
that's cool. A number of years ago, I was talking with a friend who used to be a massive mega church pastor for years, uber successful in that world, and has since left that world altogether. But I remember him telling me a story at one time where he was invited by a friend of his to a brand new church facility that they had just built, and the pastor takes the friend into and shows him the sanctuary. And my friend described it as immediately just feeling so sad for his friend, the pastor, because he realized like he's now trapped. He's trapped in
Hmm.
this where he can't ever change his mind about anything. He can't shift his theology. He can't like so when you talk about that freedom to be able to play with ideas and that freedom to be able to change and not have change be the worst thing in the world. Yeah, that freedom did not exist for us in that
Hmm.
evangelical world. Like once the thing was built and established, you just were to sort of lock it in, nail it down, and keep the thing going. Um, I was commenting with someone the other day about about shifting to progressive Christianity. And I was talking about this lightness, this freedom, and they threw it back at me as like a negative thing. Like the Christianity shouldn't be light and easy. Like it should be hard and difficult. And I did the thing I usually hate doing, just quoting a Bible verse. But I just sort of copy pasted Jesus saying like, my yoke is easy and my burden is light and my yoke is easy. Like that's got to mean something, right? Like there should be
Yeah.
some lightness to this journey. Um, Anyway, so I love that.
Yeah.
I'm also super grateful for the freedom within that. And I love your answer about the creativity. All right. Yeah, Phil Spencer. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. I think he was anticipating that I was going there. Um, oh, Mercy, by the way, I don't know, Matthew, if you saw this, but Mercy says that she's got your back if it ever gets physical, Matthew. So got a whole crew. This is great. All right. Last question, Brandon. And I try to wrap this up by 3 p.m. And we're doing perfect. Look at us. We're so efficient with our time. What do you love about your new faith and or miss about your old faith? And you can kind of answer one or both of those, however feels best to you.
Yeah, I think some of the honest answers that first come up, again, I'm going to keep bringing up Enneagram 3. It was my career path, our career paths were so clear,
Yeah.
so easy.
Yeah.
The book deals came with so much more money. Like it was a sustainable way to build a life that since I was 12, I was like, this is what my life is going to be. And now here I am at 28 on the other side of my faith shift, on the other side of pastoring and being like, what the heck am I going to do? Like, what's happening? And again, there's both a great freedom and like excitement there. And man, when you're outside of both the career path that evangelicalism gave me as a would-be pastor, and also just the, like you said, the certainty of somebody was saying it earlier in the program tonight, that like just the easiness of not having to think through all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I have so many moments throughout COVID over the past year and a half where I've like gone into spirals of existential dread, contemplating philosophy and the meaning of life. And it's like, man, when I was an evangelical, I knew the answer to those
That's
questions
right.
and I didn't need to
Yeah.
contemplate
Didn't need
anything.
to. Mm-hmm.
So missed that. And I love that there's something really profound about being able to stare into the universe, so to speak, and know that I don't know, and yet choose to persist on in this journey with love and with joy, and whether or not there's a divine heavenly reality at the end of this, or this is all just some cosmic whatever it is, like I feel like there's a boldness and a bravery and a beauty that comes from just being able to admit that I don't know and I might never know, and that gives me a lot more purpose and meaning in my day-to-day life than aiming for another reality, another world, whatever that might look like, which is what so much of conservative religion points us towards.
Yeah.
So
I occasionally come across this. It's not a criticism. What is it? People are just grasping at straws sometimes. I occasionally come across the suggestion from the evangelical conservative crowd that I or others go to progressive Christianity for the money. That we go because like that we're doing it to, and somebody on the Instagram last week when I asked the question, what's the hardest part of your shift? They answered the loss of income. And I like same exact story. Like I have never had a higher salary than when I was in the evangelical world. Never.
totally.
And I've now been in the progressive world for 8, 9, almost a decade now. And like that salary has never come close to what it was when I was in the evangelical world. So yeah, I miss that too, man. That sense of like, this is the path. And even if this path gets a little bit wonky, there's just so many other options. Like there's just so many options. And now the number of churches for someone like myself who wants to stay in ministry, like those options are super slim. Anyway, I'm with you, man. So I miss that, but I love what you shared about what you love about your new faith. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw this comment up there. Jay Arroyo says, I'm speaking as a gay celibate Christian who's on the evangelical side, but I'm still open-minded and respect your guys' views. And I'm so sorry you got hate for that talk after the show. Yeah, thanks, Jay. But yeah, thank you for sharing that, Jay. We can have these respectful, open-minded conversations and have some lightness. And this part of what I love about my new faith is the lightness that I can have around these conversations. Now, asterisks, unless someone's like fundamental dignity as a human is at stake, that's not light to me. That's like, no, like I'll bring the big guns. But on a lot of these other issues, it's like, and this is sorry, my conversation with Sean's so fresh in my mind still, so I apologize kind of that I've referenced it now like 17 times. But I had such a lightness about me while talking with him. The heaviness came afterwards when I realized what I was processing with all of it. And the number of people who commented that I just looked smug and arrogant and all those things, it's like, that's so fast. Like, I don't doubt that I project a type of energy that some people read as that, but it's just so fascinating to have that reflected back to me when my internal is like, no, I'm legitimately saying I don't really know the answer to this. Don't take my word for it. I could be wrong. Like, there's this lightness to it that I really love. Whereas back in our evangelical days, everything was so serious and you had to have it right. Anyway.
Yeah,
there wasn't a question there. I was just talking, and then I stopped and just awkwardly made you be like, wait, do I say something now? You're
embrace
great.
The silence, So.
Embrace the silence. Yeah, we could just like both momentarily stop and just freeze and make people feel like the connection was lost. Wait, refresh. What happened? All right. Yes. Jennifer Nicole says, this is so good. I missed the first half of this conversation. I'm looking forward to watching it in its entirety tonight. Yeah, it'll be there. They upload usually almost instantaneously on YouTube. Facebook can sometimes take a little longer. And then I'll chop this up and put it on Instagram maybe later on in the week. Yes, Robert Adams, thank you for joining us. Mercy, thank you for joining us. This has been wonderful. Brandon, it's now hit 3 p.m. We have come to the end of my time that I tell people I will keep them for. So thanks so much. If anybody wants to follow Brandon on Instagram, it is at Brandan Robertson, right?
That's it.
All your letters. There's no J, no Jehoshaphat.
No J.
No Jandon.
Nope.
Just at Brandan Robertson. And Brandon, you've got, what's the thing you just put out in the world? What's your newest book? I know you have like 18,000 books. But is there anything you want to just invite people to check out? I've been shamelessly plugging this damn thing all hour long, so why don't you take a plug?
Yeah, I think the book that I would say about my own faith shift is my first book, Nomad, A Spirituality for Traveling Light, which we just re-released last year. So check that out. All that's on Instagram. Links are in the bio. So
awesome. All right, buddy. Yeah. Good hanging with you. All right.
Yeah.
Bye, Brandon.
Good. Peace.
I just heart that guy. Thanks so much, everyone, for hanging out with us today. If you are watching this on the Facebooks and you want to like my page, that's great. You don't have to. It's completely optional. And or if you're watching this on YouTube and you want to subscribe, also great. Again, entirely optional. If you would like to come back tonight, the Kate and Colby show. The Kate is my wife and partner and spouse, and I am the Colby. We are bringing in our dear friends, Reverend Sarah Heath. Well, I guess by point you can't see. Reverend Sarah Heath and Kevin Garcia are coming tonight. They have started this new podcast called Your Favorite Aunts or Ants. I don't know how they say it. I'll ask them tonight. But come back tonight at 7 p.m. That'll be a ton of fun as Kate and I do our Wednesday night Kate and Colby show. And that is it for me. Don't forget to sign up for Perspective Shift, my weekly newsletter. You can get that at, here it comes one more time, colbymartin.substack.com. Grace and peace to you, Phil Spencer. Thanks to you, Mandy. Hey, Jeff Tarkenton. Yes, anchored in Jesus. Nothing else matters. Thanks for sharing. Phil Spencer. Thanks for joining us. Richard Henchman. Love to you. All right. Love you all. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks for watching this week's episode of Perspective Shift. I'm going to now invite you to do one of three things, or do them all if you're an overachiever. First, why don't you go ahead and subscribe to my free Perspective Shift newsletter. You can do that by going to colbymartin.substack.com. This will ensure that each week the articles that I write arrive safely in your inbox. Second, if you're watching this on YouTube, just go ahead and hit subscribe on my channel. That'd be awesome. And or if you're watching this on Facebook, would you click like on my page? For me, this is a win-win in that it helps me know that you're out there and that you care. Plus, it helps you know when I'm going live. For all my other work, including books that I've written or sermons that I've preached, head on over to colbymartinonline.com. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me live next week.